Hi everyone, this is Christine from the Door Doctor, and today we're going to be making a sunflower primarily using this red plaid poly burlap mesh. All the mesh for today is actually going to be poly burlap mesh, but this will be the star of the show. It has, I don't know, a little Christmas vibe to it because it's red and green. It has red, lime green, white, black, and yellow stripes running through it, but I thought it was pretty and it would be a nice bold springtime, summertime flower. So part one will be supplies. Part two, I'm going to show you how to do the petal for this flower. And then part three will be the flower center and finishing the flower. So for supplies. So as I mentioned before, we're going to be using all poly burlap mesh for this wreath today. I think we'll use 3 primary colors. I haven't decided if I'm going to add leaves yet, so possibly 4 meshes. But the first one is this 10-inch wide poly burlap mesh in this plaid. This was purchased at craftoutlet.com, much like all of the poly burlaps for today's video. So we'll use that as our primary color, and we'll offset that with a black window pane poly burlap mesh. So you can see it has all these little cutout holes in it. That's also a 10-inch wide roll, and some plain solid red poly burlap mesh. Again, all bought at craftoutlet.com. These I usually cut into 10 by 10-inch squares using my trusty wood burner, which I don't have on my desk right now, but I'll have that soon. I use a wood burner just because it's easier to melt sort of the edges, the cut edges of the mesh. And so that will be our mesh. I might add some lime green poly burlap leaves on the back of the wreath. I'm just not sure yet. We're going to be using as our base this 8-inch in diameter Dollar Tree wire wreath frame. Love my Dollar Tree frames. They're pretty sturdy. They have 3 sections separated by these little crossbars here. And I've already gone and inserted a number 5 plastic mesh in the center of the wire wreath frame. I've attached it with zip ties, and that's to allow me to place petals all the way into the center of the wreath frame, and also allows me to attach the flower center at the end. Okay, and then that brings me to my favorite 8-inch plastic zip ties. I attach all of my petals using zip ties. I just prefer the 8-inch length. My hands function better with the 8-inch, but certainly you can purchase whatever works for your hands, whatever makes it easier for you. I buy these on Amazon. They come in a pack of 1,000 for about $20. Then we're going to finish our flower center using this yellow jute flex tubing. You can buy this at a number of different online wreath shops, and we'll be making little loops using this tubing. That'll be our flower center, a nice loopy center. And you'll need some coordinating pipe cleaners. So I have 5 yellow 12-inch long pipe cleaners. That'll allow us to attach the loops of the tubing to a little square of 5 or number 7 plastic mesh, whatever you have on hand, plastic mesh. And that'll end up being attached to the center of the wreath. And then for finishing, I usually like to use pipe cleaners to make a little loop in the back of the wreath. And then finishing, I typically will cut out a coordinating color of felt in the same size as the wreath frame, just so you can cover the back of the wreath nicely and it's not going to scratch your door. So I think that's all in terms of supplies. I'm going to clean this up a little bit and come back and we'll start cutting some mesh and assembling some petals. All right, so welcome back. We're going to assemble the petals for our wreath next. But quickly, a quick word about cutting mesh. I think for most of my poly burlap mesh, I use a wood burner to cut the edges, the cut edges, just to seal it because this is such a plastic type material. And I use a wood burner, as you can see here. It gets very hot, has a sort of bezeled or chiseled tip on the tip of it. And I usually just measure my 10 inches and run this tip through the small little squares of your poly burlap mesh. Like a plaid poly burlap mesh because it's easier for my eyes to see in between all the little squares. And so you want to move slowly and just try to keep your tip you know, within the row that you've selected. I usually cut on my glass dining room table. So obviously I measure on my cutting board and I usually slide it over and I cut the mesh on the glass surface. But probably what would be easier is just to get a glass cutting board and place it over your cutting mat. That way you don't have to move the way I do all the time. But that's just the way I've adapted. So we're just going to cut a few of these squares here. I'm just going to get rid of some of this extra on the end of this roll here. And the other thing that's key, I think, is to wear a mask when you're cutting your poly burlap mesh. It gives off quite a bit of smoke, and you definitely don't want to be breathing all of that in. Not good for your lungs. All right, just I've cut most of these already. This is just more for demonstration purposes. And so you can see it just gives a little extra strength to the edges of the mesh. What I also like to do if I'm selling a wreath is I cut with my wood burner and then I take a little craft paintbrush and add a little bit of Mod Podge to the cut edges of my mesh squares. And then I let all of that dry for a couple of hours. And then that just, you know, makes it less likely to fray. So I've gone ahead and cut. We're going to start with row 1. And row 1, I think I'd like to do this with red solid poly burlap alternating with the plaid poly burlap. So I'm going to go ahead and get my frame here. And again, you know, this is separated into 3 sections using these little crossbars to separate them. And we're going to be applying our petals to this second wire here. And based on this petal type, I think I'm going to end up doing 4 per section, so 12 total. But you know, depending on how it looks, sometimes I'll put in a few extra. So I'm thinking either 12 or 15, but we'll just sort of decide as we go along. So I'm going to place my zip tie here, and the type of petal that I'm going to use is a sunflower petal. I don't actually know if it has a name. But it's pretty simple to make. Usually what I'll do is I lie my square piece of mesh flat in front of me with a cut edge facing towards me and one cut edge facing away. And you're just going to take the opposite corners and meet in the middle of that square. So just opposite corners of that square, have them kiss in the middle, just like that. Reminds me of an envelope, you know, the opening of an envelope on each side. And then you're just going to gather from one folded edge to the other folded edge, right in the middle. You're just gonna pinch it right in the middle like that. And then you're gonna flip it over, keeping that little pinched center. And then you're going to bring one side, one petal over the other petal. Take your finger out there. You're gonna have like a little, almost like a little finger hold, little hole in the middle. And you're gonna pinch that. So I'll bring that up closer. And what's nice is you can fold this in such a way that both of your seamed edges are showing and your cut edges are on the same side. One's underneath, and then you have this cut edge. This cut edge is going to be covered by the next petal. So when you place this on your wreath frame, you're going to place number 1 and then move counterclockwise around the wreath frame. That way each following petal, or each successive petal, is going to cover the cut edge of the first one. So we'll place that there. All right, and that's petal number 1. And so we'll just move right around. And I think what I'll do is I'm going to place 1 red and then 2 of the plaid. So again, let me move this guy out of the way. Move this up. So you're gonna have your square with your cut edges, one facing you, one facing the opposite, or far away from you. Take the opposite points, lower left to upper right, and then you're gonna have them meet in the middle, gather across the middle, pinch it, flip it, and then bend at that little pivot point in the middle where you were holding it. And then sort of pinch it again at that gathering point. And then again, you'll see seamed edge, and you'll place that next to the first petal. Use your zip tie. And I think we'll space them about 2 inches apart. We'll see. I'll place my next zip tie, and we'll do another. So again, cut edge facing towards me. Bring those 2 points into the middle, gather, pinch it in the middle, flip it over, hold on to that little pinch center, bend at that little pivot point, slip your finger out, pinch it, and there you go. And then place it on your wreath. So I think what I'll do, I'll do 4 per section. So that'll be the original 12. So we're gonna do red next. So we'll go red, and then 2 of the plaid, and then another red. All right, so with your red, cut edges facing towards you, 2 opposite points meet in the middle, gather, pinch it, flip it, hold on to that little pinched part, bend in the middle, slip your finger out, and grab it. All right. All right. So now we'll do 2 more of the plaid. So I think I'll go red, plaid, plaid, red, plaid, plaid, red. We'll see how it looks. All right. Flip that over. I think sometimes the hardest thing about this petal is just shaping it, you know? Making it into that nice sort of teardrop shaped petal. Be a little hard to come by. Sometimes they look a little square to me, but today they look nice and crisp. All right. Do 1 more plaid here. All right, meet in the middle there. Gather across the middle, flip it over, hold that little gathering point, bend, slip your finger out, pinch it, shape it, and then place it. All right, so that'll be row 1. So 12 petals total, 4 per section. I'll do red, 2 plaids, red, 2 plaids, and so forth. And I'll come back once I've finished all 12, and then we'll talk about row 2 of the petals. See you in a bit. Okay, so I finished row 1, and now we're gonna move on to row 2. Row 1, you can see that I ended up with, I'll flip this over so you can see the back too, 12 petals total, with alternating plaid with 1 red. So 2 plaid to 1 red. And I think for the second row, we're gonna do all black using the window pane mesh. And I think I'll also try to fit 12 petals in this row as well. And I've already placed 1. And where I've placed it is I usually just go right inside where that first row of mesh is. So I don't use the black wire here, but I use the plastic, the clear plastic mesh. And if you've watched any of my videos, you know that I like to make sure that I don't know, that the subsequent rows of petals are pretty evenly placed. And so one thing I like to do is I'll place my first 4 petals in quadrants, sort of like north, south, east, and west, just so that they're even, and then I fill in the spaces in between those 4 petals. So I've placed petal number 1, I guess you could call that my north, and then I'll go and fill in one directly across from it and go from there. So let me get my zip tie in first, if my zip tie will cooperate. And then we'll make our petal. So same petal technique for the first row. So you're going to take your window pane mesh and you're going to have it so that the cut edge is facing towards you. Take the opposite 2 corners, this lower left, upper right, have them meet in the middle, and then gather across the middle. This is a little harder with the window pane mesh because it's a little lumpy bumpy. But same technique. I'll flip it over, kind of pivot at that little pinched section there. That's where you're going to apply it with your zip tie. All right. There we go. Shape it a little bit before you cinch it in place. And then let me place my next zip tie. So my east and west. So there'll be my 3rd one. So let's see, take my square there. It's sure hard to see black window pane mesh over my cutting mat. So I'll move it over a little bit. I don't know if that helps. But take the opposite 2 corners, bring them together, gather across the middle portion here, almost like, looks like a bow tie, flip it over, hold that little pinched section, swivel it, grab it, and shape it and place it. All right, let's do zip tie number 4. We'll go in here, move that guy out of the way so I can do my petal here. And certainly you can do any color combination. You could use solid mesh if you don't have window pane. I just happen to have a lot of the window pane mesh, and yeah, I just kind of like it. You can sort of see through, get a little peek of color behind the black. All right, so there's 4 petals, north, south, east, and west. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place 2 in this space, 2 more petals in that space, 2 more here, 2 more there. So we'll have 12 total petals for row number 2. So I'll break away and I'll finish that same petal technique as you've been doing. And then when we come back, we'll do row 3, which will be all only the plaid mesh. So I'll see you in a couple minutes. All right, welcome back. So row 2 is done. As you can see, I was able to get all 12 petals in there of the black window pane mesh. And now we're going to do row 3, which is just going to be solid, not solid. It's just going to be the plaid mesh for all of the petals. And in looking at this, I think we're going to have enough space to do 8 petals. Originally I was thinking 6, but I think this will accommodate 8 nicely and give a nice full wreath. And so I think what I'll do, just looking to see where I want to put this, I think I'll place the first petal maybe about 1.5 inches in front of the last one. That's how many, like 3, 5 little square boxes in between the 2 petals. And I'm going to do same petal style and same kind of placement. So I'm going to place 4 petals, north, south, east, and west, and then fill in the space with the other 4. All right. So there's petal number 1. Let's tie that down there. shape it a little bit before you cinch it in place. We'll do petal number 2. Let's see, yep. Try to get that as close to the same spot as before. So directly across from petal 1. Shape that a little bit. And then we'll do our next one. I think I'll place it, I'm just trying to be evenly spaced with these petals. So this will be number 3. A little bit of, fold it down a little bit, and then petal 4. Place that guy right there. And I'll show you this in a second, once I snip all my zip ties. So bring those 2 corners together, gather across the middle, flip it over, fold again, and attach that right there. All right, so first 4, take a breather, give you guys a look. So there's our 4. Oh, I like that. So north, south, east, west, and you can see the placement compared to the second row. Now we're just gonna go fill in those spaces with 1, 2, 3, 4 more petals. So a total of 8. Place 1 there. Let's see. Trying to make sure you can see me make my petal and place it on the wreath. It's a little tricky. There we go. When you do this spacing with the first 4 the way I do it, you do have to, after you place these petals in the open spaces, you do have to tuck them under. So just handle your mesh carefully there, so you're not causing it to fray. Let's see, so we'll do number 5 here. Hopefully I cut enough mesh. I think I did. Fold that over. Tuck this guy underneath. There we go. Number 7 and 8, almost there. Out of the way. Gather across the middle here, flip it over, fold it, pinch it, shape it, place it if I can find my wreath. My wreath didn't walk away. There we go. All right, and then tuck this carefully under the petal next to it. All right. One more than no more. Let's see. Oh, look at that. I have one extra piece of mesh to spare. Excellent. All right. And there's your final petal. So I'm just going to place this on here, cut my zip tie, make sure I like all my petals and how they are folded. There we go. All right. And so there we are so far. I like that. I think that's different. It's not your typical, right? And now I was thinking, you know, you could do a range of different flower centers of all different colors. I mean, you know, the loop center is probably, I think, in my personal opinion, very pretty. It's easy to do. It takes a little bit of time, but you could do a nice corded trim. I usually glue loops of corded trim to a styrofoam half. They sell these soft foam half balls. They're like a sphere cut in half, and you can glue corded trim to that. You know, I've used little Christmas ornaments in some of my wreath tutorials. That would look pretty, maybe some gold ones in the center. But for today, I'm going to use yellow jute tubing in a little looped center. And so I'm going to put the wreath away. We'll come back and make that flower center together. All right, so welcome back. So we're going to finish with our flower center. And as mentioned before, we're going to be using this yellow flex jute tubing that I bought on craftoutlet.com. These usually come 3 to a pack, so you'll get 3 pre-cut lengths like this that are about 10 yards each. And we're going to be using color-coordinated pipe cleaners to attach little clusters of loops to a piece of plastic mesh. This is about 3 by 3 inches. Should give us enough space to fit all of our little clusters. And essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut 4 of these pipe cleaners in half. These are 12-inch pipe cleaners, so that we have 8 shorter pipe cleaners, and we're going to be attaching 8 clusters of the jute tubing to the plastic mesh. I usually start in the center, and then I place 1 cluster, and then I place 7 more around the first. And so you'll see what I mean as we get going. So let's see, I'm just going to place my first, this is probably the hardest thing to show on video. I'm going to place my first pipe cleaner square in the middle there. And then let me just stretch out my long piece of tubing. It's going to go off the side here. Usually I like to do these while watching TV, so doing them on camera is a little bit different. I'm usually on the couch. So basically what I'll do for my first group of loops is I'll take the end of the jute tubing, and I just use my hand to loosely wrap the tubing around 6 times. Let's see. I apologize if I go off screen for this a little bit. Let's see. Just want the first one to start off well. So 6 little loops, and I'm just going to pinch this in the back, slide it off my hand, pinch it again in the front, bring those 2 together so it almost looks like a little bow tie. And I'm just going to apply this carefully to the center of the plastic mesh, and trying not to let go, I'm going to thread my pipe cleaner down and into the next hole on the plastic mesh. So this will be your backside, obviously. All right, and I just make sure that everything is nice and centered there, and then we're going to twist it in the back. Give it 2 or 3 twists. All right, so that's number 1. All right, and that's the back. And then number 2. So like I said, we're just going to, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just do these in a loose, a circular configuration around that center cluster, and 6 loops around your hand each time. You don't have to do 6. You could do 7 and do fewer clusters. You could certainly change that. It's just how I adapted it. So now we're going to apply the second one here. See if I can get that in there. Yep. And then before you tighten it, just make sure it's sort of even on each side of that pipe cleaner. Pull it and give it a few twists. All right. There. Yeah, they look like little bow ties or little clusters of bows, little mini bows. And let's see, number 3. This is repetitive, so it's just going to be the same thing moving around. You use your free end to do the next group of clusters. Put number 3 right about there. So there was 1, 2, 3, then we'll do 4 over there, I think. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. It's a little tricky. It gets twisted, this jute, so you want to keep it nice and loose. It's a little bit of a trick to it, to working with it. I'll put number 3. Right. Just tighten that guy up. I think I'm going to cut these pipe cleaners off so you can see a little better as I work around where all the different clusters are being placed. I think I'll do my next one right about here. Sometimes I'll do these with 2 colors wrapped around, you know, black and white or red and yellow. There's some nice sort of metallic ones. The metallic ones are a little stiffer. There are tubings that are tinsel. I like the tinsel ones. Those are easy to work with. All right, just trying to make sure none of this is too twisted. All right. And don't worry about how they look on the mesh. When I first made one of these, I thought that doesn't look very nice. It just looks like these haphazard loops of tubing, but once you place it on the flower and shape everything, it looks really pretty. And it'll look circular. So don't worry too much about the work in progress that you have. All right, so there's number 5. I think I'll place this one maybe a little further out from the center. I think spacing wise, I usually leave about three little mesh holes, little squares open in between each cluster. I don't usually measure it. Just sort of, it's based on feel at this point. Just move in slowly because it's twisting upon itself and you want it to stay nice and loose. All right, number 6. Pinch that. And don't let go. It's the hardest part. It's trying to get the pipe cleaner in before you let go. And you have to start all over again. Not the worst thing. All right. And there's 5 so far. So center, 1, 2, 3, 4. And now I have 3 more, so I'll probably do one here, one there, and one there. Let's see. Place it just about there. All right. So make your 6 loops. And carefully gather this, grab it, slide it off your hand, pinch it. Try not to let go, especially on camera as you're filming. It gets harder the tighter everything gets here. All right. Just gonna make sure that's even. That looks a little, I like to make sure the loops are, give them a tug on each side. And this is nice flower center, no glue gun, no fancy materials. Don't need any special tools. I always like that. Some of my flower centers take so much time and patience. I avoid making them sometimes because they look lovely, but it's just a little too labor intensive, you know? This is nice and simple. And like I said, sit in front of the TV. Sit in front of the TV, watch one of my videos, make some flower centers, pass the time. There we go. You don't need to be tied down to the glue gun for anything here. All right, so that's number 7. And one more. And I think for the last one, I will place it right about here. And I'll show you this at the end. And I think we'll have just enough, maybe not 6 loops this time, we'll see, maybe 5. Sometimes it's a little short, you know. Let's see, 4, yeah, I think we'll do 5. Cut that little leftover piece. All right. All right, that's the last one. So 5 loops for the last one. Just make sure that looks nice and even. Give it a nice twist along the back. Cut off my pipe cleaners. I'm going to cut off this extra little piece. And there. And then usually I'll fold these pipe cleaners down in a second, but I'll just hold that close so that you can see all the 8 different clusters and where I placed them. It's roughly a circular configuration, not perfect. And then I just push these down, push them down so they're nice and flat. And then you're just going to cut around The outer pipe cleaners, again, doesn't have to be perfect. You're just trying to get rid of extra plastic mesh. All right, that's that. And then using a 5th yellow pipe cleaner, I usually thread this through the middle. And I usually use my first cluster as a guide. So I put the pipe cleaner on one side of the center of that cluster. You can kind of see it under there. And down on the other end. So you come out like that. And like I said, it looks a bit a mess when it's like this. But once you place it on your wreath, you can shape it and it won't look quite so wild. So we're just going to thread the pipe cleaners down through the middle. Let's see, give it a nice tight, pull it nice and tightly, twist it. I'll cut those in a minute and flip it around. And then what I like to do is I like to start in the middle, pull that middle cluster up, and then each one of the side ones I kind of pull to the side a little bit, almost like separating each one, placing them. I don't know how best to explain it other than that. I just go all the way around and make sure that each one is sort of not lying flat, but that they're not overlapping one another too much, you know? That they're not all tangled, I guess is the best explanation. Okay, so like that. And then from there, I just fluff them. Fluff them a little bit. You don't want it to look too organized. You want it to look a little chaotic, but you want it to look round as well. All right, and there we go. And so then to finish, we'll just do finishing without taking a break. So to finish, I'm going to tuck in this loose pipe cleaner, and I'm going to grab a couple of things. One is my felt circle that I pre-cut, and then a red pipe cleaner. And so usually what I like to do is I fold my pipe cleaner in half, and then each half I fold in half again so that it'll make a letter W, and then I slip that in under the outer part of the frame, the outer row. And then, I don't know if you can see this very well. So I'll slip it in like that. All right, and then you're gonna wrap each of these loose ends around the back of the loop. So I'm gonna do one this way, and then this one around the back. And then I'll usually wrap it around again, around the front, each loose end around the front. And then, to give it a little more strength, I will attach these loose ends to the wire frame so it's not going to slide around. And remember, all of this is going to be covered, nice and pretty, hide all your sins. Should look like that. Okay. And then to finish this circle, I have a nice small hole punch that I usually put 6 to 8 little holes around the outer rim of the felt. And I actually have some red zip ties that I'll use to attach this. So you just thread a zip tie through the outer row of the frame, and then place these all around. Nice and neat. That way the back looks pretty. That way you don't have any rough edges that are going to scratch your door. That way, if you have a glass door that you're hanging this on, I mean, the back is never going to look as nice as the front, but at least it'll look neat, so that if you have to look at your wreath from the inside of your house, it should look nice and not all a mess. Let's see. The other thing I like to do to finish my poly burlap mesh wreaths is I usually spray them with a clear matte Rust-Oleum spray just to slow fading. You know, I think the sun is going to fade any mesh that you place in direct sunlight, no matter what you do. But having some sort of protectant should at least slow that and allow you to get some more time out of your wreath after putting in all this hard work. So I'm just gonna trim these. A little extra work up front like that, and I think you get a little bit more time out of your wreath. Make it a little bit more durable. And so now I'm just gonna tuck these, the little ends of the zip ties. Probably hard for you to see it because it's all red. Look at that, all matchy. But I'm gonna tuck these little ends under so that hopefully when I'm done, it'll look nice and neat. And so there is our finished product. Cute, I like that. So I hope you liked this too. If you liked this video and want to see some of my other productions, hit subscribe at the bottom and you'll be able to see my newest videos as soon as they come out. Hope you have a great day. Take care.